I'm going to explain to you why in 1 Nephi 2 it matters that Nephi is large of stature.
There's this ritual that took place in Babylon called the Aikido Festival, and what happened was the king, before he's anointed and enthroned, has to go through a ritual slapping.
The Book of Mormon gives us reason to think that it wasn't that this was a ritual gesture and it was something closer to a beating.
Even Isaiah, he uses some of this language.
The Book of Mormon writers are visionary men. They are temple worshipers themselves, and they write for an audience they expect to be also temple worshipers.
So you're basically saying that Lehi recited temple liturgy.
No, I'm not basically saying that. That is what I am saying. At this point, what I tend to think is that what Jesus' ministry consisted of included initiating people into mysteries that had mostly been forgotten.
This makes it make so much sense why, when Christ comes to the people in Bountiful, he shows them the Sermon on the Mount.
And you can read the Sermon on the Mount as an ordinance.
The following is an episode of WardRadio and does not represent the thoughts or the opinions of KHTS, its owners, or any of its affiliates, nor does it represent the official opinion of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. With that said, sit back, relax, and enjoy the program. It's so sad that now we know all this depth to the temple ceremony, and our church is neutering it for the feminists. You know what I'm saying?
I have no comment.
Garden. What? Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, back to Ward Radio. I am your host, Cardinellis. Today I'm joined in the studio by a killer cast. We got Brad Whitbeck here, Hayden Paul from the Stick of Joseph, as well as Dave Butler and Mike Day. And we're going to be talking about a really interesting book that they're coming out with here. We're going to do a deep dive. Like, this is going to be the deepest of
very
deep dives. Yes, a very deep dive here in which we talk about, correct me if I'm wrong, Dave, okay, how basically we all need to go back and reread the Book of Mormon as temple liturgy, because many common themes and maybe even missing ordinances from the Sermon on the Mount are manifest in Lehi's journey through Shazer, the Valley of Lemuel, the Land of Bountiful, so on and so forth, as a 3-part temple ceremony. That we've been reading this all wrong, that Laman and Lemuel weren't just kind of like the prideful brothers that had a personality flaw and couldn't get on board, but they were literally Deuteronomist with a competing ideology against Lehi and his revelatory sect of Judaism that believed in personal revelation. And that when you understand the context of the temple ceremonies that are manifest in the Book of Mormon, it's going to blow your mind. It's going to change completely how you read the Book of Mormon, and it's going to make you want to go buy this book. Is that a fair intro, Dave Butler?
That is an excellent introduction. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, awesome. Let's dive right in. Brad, did you want to say something first?
Oh, I was just going to say, it's not necessarily that we've been reading the Book of Mormon all wrong. It's that there's so much more to it.
I like that. I like that.
That was a very diplomatic answer. See, I wanted to
Cardin's
call out,
a black and white guy.
You know what I'm saying? Yeah. So, all right, cool. Awesome. Then let's get into it.
Yeah. So one of the sort of obvious markers, and there are others, and I think we're going to talk about them in some of these episodes, of temple content is a 3-part spatial sequence. Okay, so Lehi's dream ascends into the presence of the tree of life in a 3-part sequence. It starts with the field, which is large as it was the world, and then there's the great and spacious building with the filthy river, and then you pass through the straight and narrow path into the presence of the tree of life. And those are 3 spaces. We talked at our live stream on April 14th. We talked about another one of those 3-part spaces, which is Exodus 24, where the children of Israel remain at the foot of the mountain, space 1. Moses and the elders and Joshua ascend to the middle space where they have a feast with the Lord, and that's space 2. And then Moses and Joshua ascend behind a veil of a cloud into the 3rd space, which is the top of the mountain where they meet with God and receive the law. Okay.
So it sounds like you're kind of almost doing like a Joseph Campbell's hero's journey thing, or like a save the cat, beat sheet.
I would not take the Blake Snyder comparison, but the Joseph Campbell one is good.
Okay.
So, Not to Save the Cat is not a fine book for an aspiring
Okay, actually, let me
screenwriter
make a better
learning
one. You're doing like
know
a
structure.
Mick Jagger. No, I'm just kidding.
By the way, is Save the Cat, is that like Cat in the Hat? What is
It's
that?
a book about
It's a
screenwriting.
It gives you
Yeah.
like a beat sheet of successful movies.
I'm learning.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, not
learning.
on topic though. You're learning random things.
Yeah.
So
Yeah, the hero's journey is a better.
it's right to have your head in the mythology space here because we are talking about something that is liturgical, meaning it's ritual, it's an ordinance, and any ordinance has a myth and meaning a story that explains the ordinance. And the ordinance we're talking about here is large and complex, and so it has a large myth. And the myth, and I think we're going to talk about this maybe probably not in this little segment, but in the later segments, is the myth of expulsion from and return to Eden. And the easiest space to see that, just a couple of verses, is actually in Alma 12, and it's actually someone in the city of Ammonihah who brings it up. Okay.
And myth doesn't mean fake. For those who are like, wait, this isn't a myth. Myth just means story that is told.
Yeah.
Myth just means story that is told. So 3-part space. So the third space is Eden. It's the Holy of Holies. This is the temple. The 3 spaces of the temple are, first of all, the open porch, and then secondly, the Haykal, the long center room, the holy place, and then the Holy of Holies, or the Debir. So I starting in 2013 began to stare, with great ferocity at that first Nephi 17,
A truly
18.
ferocious
It's
stare.
a truly ferocious stare.
What does that look like? What is a truly
It's
ferocious?
like this. So I'm staring at the Book of Mormon for a decade going, look, Nephi flat out tells me that that Eden and the Holy of Holies is here. Now, maybe he's saying, it was a place of great delight, right? But Nephi has limited space. He's writing on plates, and he's crafting a very deliberate map of this journey, right? It's not a travelogue. We can see that very easily. If you just kind of recount at a high level, well, what happens on this journey, okay? What are the places we go to? Well, we go down and, like to the Gulf of Aqaba, and then 3 more days, and we're in a place called the Valley of Lemuel. How long are we there? I don't know, a month, 2 months. There's a bunch of adventures, okay? Then we go 4 days to a place called Shazer. What happens in Shazer?
Nothing.
That is
really.
correct. Nothing happens in
Yeah.
Shazer. But
That
it gets
is
mentioned.
correct.
Yeah, it gets mentioned anyway.
Yeah.
Then we go for, I think it's a space of many days, and we come to a wilderness which doesn't get a name, but there's a mountain, and Nephi breaks his bow and he hunts for food. And then we travel for, I think it's the space of many days, and we get to Nahum. Ishmael dies. We're there for a space of a time, I think. Then we travel 8 years. All we know about that is we eat raw meat, and the women successfully nurse the babies. Right, that's what we know about 8 years, and then suddenly we're in Eden. Right, so this is not that journey is not a careful travelogue recording everything that happens. Nephi has 8+ years of data, and he is picking out of that elements to craft a story. So it's a carefully structured story, and he is picking out names to tell us. He doesn't tell us. Not everything gets a name. Okay, and so he's choosing the names. So this is art. Okay, we should not imagine it is the transcript of a CCTV camera. It is not. It is a tale. Doesn't mean it's false.
It's not a daily
Doesn't mean
journal.
it doesn't happen. It means Nephi took, his experience, and he crafted out of it a narrative.
And just so that people get the right idea of this, Nephi is writing these things down after they are in the new world,
Right.
and he's been living in the land of Nephi for years.
Right.
And then the Lord tells him to write these things down on plates.
Right.
So this is him looking back on these things
Yep.
with a purpose.
Absolutely. So so what are the spaces? So I'd been thinking, okay, there's like, what are the name spaces? There's Eden, Bountiful. There's Nahum, the center room, and then there's Shazer. And I've been trying to figure out, well, how Shazer, nothing happens. It's a porch. How does this line up? And that was sort of where my brain was stuck for a decade.
And then Hayden came.
And then Hayden Paul struck an alluring pose and said, patriotically, No, he said, dude, you're leaving out of space. What about Valley of Lemuel? And my first thought was, then it's a 4-part space. It doesn't work. And then I realized why he was right. Okay. And
I knew it all along, like why I was right. But
Hayden-
I let him figure it out and then put it in a book.
Okay, keep going.
it's really good pedagogy to not give me the answer, just to give me like a hint to induce me to find the answer.
Deliberate.
Hayden has been a very good master that way. So let me give you the high level, and then we'll walk through it. Okay. So it is a 3-part ascent. Nephi has given us, in Lehi's dream, a 3-part ascent into the presence of the tree of life in Solomon's temple. That is in 1 Nephi 8. That vision tells us that Solomon's temple has been taken by people who are hostile to Lehi's party. They are rich. They wear very fine clothing. They sit up in the great and spacious building, and they mock people who are trying to enter the presence of the tree of life. People get lost in the mists of darkness, which are the incense mists, and they fall into the filthy river and drown. Okay, the temple's been captured. The tree of life is still there. It's still accessible, but the temple has been captured by hostile forces. What Nephi then shows us about the journey of the Lehite party is that it's the same journey, but he maps it out not against Solomon's temple, but against the tabernacle. Okay. Now, what is that telling us? At a high level, at a sort of a story symbol level, he's saying, look, the capture of the building by the hostile forces is ultimately irrelevant. This is the same message Alma and Amulek give to the Zoramite poor when they say, how can we worship since we're locked out of the building in Alma 32?
Yeah.
The answer is, bros, it mattereth not. The tree of life is still available. It starts with lots of prayer and faith. Okay.
Yeah, rock on.
Yeah.
And by the way, it ends in getting to a tree that feeds you.
It ends in getting to the tree of life. It's explicitly spelled out, right? Again, things the Book of Mormon obsesses about. So the fact that the map is against the tabernacle also sort of casts Lehi as a new Moses, right? And as this journey is an Exodus journey. And we're going back to simpler times, right?
To its roots.
Yeah. So what is the journey? The Valley of Lemuel, Hayden is right. This is the first space in the tabernacle. Now, the tabernacle doesn't have a porch. So the first space in the tabernacle is the open courtyard in front of it.
Okay.
Okay. Now, there's a lot to say about this, and I think we have 10 minutes left or something here in the sequence. So this is still going to be pretty high level. Understand this is like a 40-page chapter in the book.
Yeah, rock on.
On the back of his book right here, that is what the tabernacle of Moses looks like. That's like a basic representation of what space we're talking about.
Did it have the giant not for resale sign on
that
the
is
top of
that's in Numbers. Numbers 22 specifies.
Okay, cool.
Thou shalt-
It's just mistranslated.
It's part of usury.
Yeah,
correct.
okay,
Thou shalt
rock
write
on.
not for resale. Correct.
All right, keep going.
So one of the first indicators that we should understand the Valley of Lemuel as symbolically being the open courtyard is, what does Lehi do as soon as they get there? By the way, they get there almost immediately. 1 Nephi 2, right? The Jews at Jerusalem want to kill Lehi. Bam, they go down to the Gulf. 3 more days. What does Lehi do when he gets there?
He builds an altar.
He builds an altar and sacrifices, right? So, and to connect to our discussion on the live stream on the 14th, this is something prohibited by the Deuteronomists, right? Who are probably the party of the Jews who are at Jerusalem, who hold the temple. They're those who are wearing fine clothing and mocking those who want to get into the tree of life. And
Progmos.
some of them are-
do it.
right.
Oh, but this is he builds the altar, and then Laman and Lemuel
Have a freak out
about
session.
it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Laman and Lemuel repeatedly get upset because Laman and Lemuel are they seem to be good Deuteronomists. So they say the people who are Jerusalem, we know that they are righteous.
They're not atheists.
By the way, they
A
freak
lot of
out and they
times they're
call
atheists.
Lehi a Jose, which means visionary man. And it says in Deuteronomy to kill those guys. And so
can't be a
they're
visionary
literally
man.
calling him what the Deuteronomists say you can't have. So it's so fascinating.
And they deny.
Wait, so you're literally saying Laman and Lemuel were so that it wasn't okay? So, like for example, in Living Scriptures and the cute cartoons we grew up with, Laman and Lemuel's giant flaw is one of laziness and slothfulness or jealousy, or it's like personality flaws. You're saying instead of being a personality flaw, you think that it might be a philosophical flaw.
They're very
Just-
religious.
Yeah, the fact that Laman.
So
and
you're saying
Lemuel-
it's like Deuteronomists versus visionaries
Yes.
within Lehi's home, just like there might be an anti-Mormon and a pro-LDS person
in the same family.
In the same family.
Yeah, and Laman and Lemuel, when they object in 1 Nephi 15, Nephi gets his explanation of Lehi's dream, and they say, "Explain it to us." And he says, "Well, you could pray and ask." And I'm paraphrasing.
Yeah.
And they say, "Well, we know that the Lord maketh no such thing known unto us." They're not saying that we are lazy or unrighteous. They're denying his doctrine of personal revelation.
That revelation isn't real.
Or that only priests in the temple can get it.
Oh.
Right? It's the centralization point. He maketh it not known unto us.
Or if it's not in the scriptures, if it's not written down, then you can't get it.
This
you
is so
can't just
crazy.
go-
So really, just like the Book of Mormon is being written for our day, because really, within one family, one of the biggest problems that we have right now with all this current wokeism is that within the culture of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, we jokingly say progmos and whatnot, but there's literally people I know who will. Who are prohibiting their parents from seeing their grandchildren until they denounce the church's stance on, I don't know, gay temple ceilings or whatever, and it's causing deep, very painful divisions within these families. And it's all based off of an ideology. And so when we try and convert the Book of Mormon into just an argument amongst brothers based upon personality flaws, we're actually doing a disservice to the nature of the book being written in our day, when in reality it looks like it was an ideological rift.
That is so well said, bro. Seriously.
And they carry their own ideology
Okay.
in the New World, right? So remember, we have multiple encounters with Lamanites later who say they have a whole different story. The Book of Mormon is very sophisticated about this stuff. It's not good guys and bad guys. There is a layman point of view and there's a Lamanite point of view. Right, and his descendants believe they were robbed.
And there's a lot at stake. I mean, this is like in their bones. I always say Laman and Lemuel are very religious. They have just a different take, right? I mean,
They have a different religion.
yeah.
Well, it's just like modern wokeism, modern progressivism is in the name of not believing and being scientific. They've developed a dogma deeper and more.
It's a new faith.
It's more religious than any religion I was ever raised in, right? So, wow, this is such. And you guys just came up with this recently?
Chapter 9 of the book. It's not even published yet. It's coming out May 1st. So
wow.
But we got like 7 minutes left in this live stream.
Okay,
So let me kind of motor through this quickly.
Radio program, not a live
So there's
not a live stream.
there's
This
an
radio
altar in the
program.
courtyard. So there's an altar in the courtyard of the temple. We see that with Lehi, but
And there's a
other
laver.
things.
There's water, right? So one of the things we get is Lehi's arrival in the valley. He immediately announces a short poem for each of his two challenging sons, each of his two Deuteronomous sons, right? And for Lemuel he names the valley after. Laman he names the water after, and he wants it to flow into the fountain of all righteousness. Well, in the context, if you imagine it's in physical geography, it sort of seems like he's saying this should flow into the adjoining Red Sea, which is the fountain of righteousness. That doesn't make a whole lot of sense. But if you realize that Nephi is mapping this out against a tabernacle geography, the Holy of Holies is Eden in the tabernacle, just like it's in the temple. It is a place of waters. The fountain of righteousness is there. That's 1 Nephi 11:25. And what Lehi is hoping is that Laman, the water, will flow into the Holy of Holies. And it's really poignant because he's hoping for a miracle. What he's hoping is for the water to flow uphill back into the spring, right? And so we see now.
By the way I read that is he's saying, I want you to come into the sacred space where God is. I want you to ascend.
Which is the tree of life vision. I'm standing here and you guys won't
That's
come.
what I
Your
see
mom
him
and brothers
saying.
do, but you won't.
Well, this is explicitly what he says in 2 Nephi 1 in his dying exhortation to his sons, where he's talking to them and he says, 2 Nephi 1, I think 13, 14, and 23 maybe. He says, arise, awake, arise from the dust, put on the armor of God, become men, come forward out of darkness into light. This is explicitly language of this temple ascent. He is talking to his sons who are Adam, dead, and men, awake out of the dust of which Adam was formed, arise, get dressed, and come forward from the darkness of the Haycall into the light of the Holy of Holies, right? So this is the thing he exhorts them to do with his dying exhortation. And he says,
So you're basically saying that Lehi recited temple liturgy.
No, I'm not basically saying that. That is what I am saying.
Yeah, that's exactly what
and
he's
think
saying.
about conference. Just this last conference, they used that exact imagery talking about garments.
So
Yeah.
So it's all very poignant because one thing it tells us is that Laman and Lemuel knew enough to understand this imagery. Okay, they knew enough to know that what their father was saying when he says, I think this is maybe 2 Nephi verse 15 or something. He says about, I am embraced. The Lord is embracing me. I am standing in the straight and narrow gate. Please, my sons, arise, awake, become men, put on your clothing, and come forward into light. And it's very sad because two of the sons don't.
And we're realizing now, according to what you're proposing here, that it wasn't just a personality flaw of maybe pride, as they're often portrayed in some of our
beliefs.
lessons, that it was an ideological issue based upon belief or training or education or whatever. And so just like now you may have a person who just feels like their views are incompatible with somebody else in their family, Laman and Lemuel's views were just incompatible with Lehi and with Nephi's. But similar to weak leadership nowadays that refuses to excommunicate the progmos, Lehi.
I have no comment. I don't know what
Lehi didn't quite have the stones to
come down hard enough. I don't know what a progmo is.
I know, I'm just kidding.
But yeah, and look, we can imagine it's reasonable in the context to see all kinds of attachments Laman and Lemuel might have had. Like they had friends, right? The people they knew they're leaving behind. That
All of us
they're
can
leaving
see
the
where they were
family
coming
land,
from.
right? Their
Yeah.
financial investment was there. They're being told to follow their crazy father, who's following a vision, and their son or their brother who they know is a murderer. Right, who killed their cousin, and they're like, "This is who we are following." The Laman and Lemuel story has a sympathetic telling to it for sure.
Do you think there's actually a lot of implications here, and we can just keep going into bonus material for the members if this veers verbose.
Okay,
but all jokes about progmos aside and all that other stuff, there's other implications for this if we're saying it's no longer a personality based distinction in the Book of Mormon, but maybe an ideological one, right? So what does that say about like what else are we missing? Basically, if we realize we've missed the boat about Laman and Lemuel's contention with Nephi being no longer personality based but ideological, what other implications does that have?
well, so this is. Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
I was just going to say, well, this is the story of the scriptures, especially our Christian scriptures, right? It's people who are almost of the same religion that there is a group that miss the mark. So, for example, Christ, at the time of Christ, they believe these are all Jews. These are all believing Jews. And some of them are able to recognize the Messiah because of the way that they have framed their spiritual framework in their brain, while other people miss the mark by focusing too much on this or that. And this is the same thing that's happening at the time of Lehi.
And one thing I find really fascinating about this, Carton, is their belief structure. It isn't just like minorly different in a minor way.
Mm-hmm.
It's minorly different in a way that completely affects their ability to view agency.
Mm-hmm.
When Nephi says, "Have you asked the Lord?"
Mm-hmm.
and they say, "He doesn't make these things known unto us," they're putting their responsibility for their own actions on some priest out there away from them. It's not up to them to have that, right? Salvation is deeply personal according to the Book of Mormon. This is something you need to use your agency to find for yourself.
Can I just share one verse? This is out of Deuteronomy.
No, you've been talking way too much this whole program, bro. You know what I'm saying? So you want to chime in again?
Yeah, go
Fine.
ahead.
Hog the mic, dog.
Okay, what's your verse, Mike?
Keep going.
So this to me is fascinating, and it was really, I think it was your first book, bro, that really brought it to my mind, where you said right at the beginning, Nephi says, "I've been inducted into the mysteries." I'm not going to read 1 Nephi 1:1. Y'all can look that one up. What I want to bring our audience to is Deuteronomy 29:29, and this was really unlocked from another scholar who's not LDS. Her name's Margaret Barker. And she has like a whole chapter on this, so you got to read her stuff. But basically, the verse says this: the secret things belong unto the Lord our God, but those things which are revealed belong unto us and to our children forever, that we may do the words of the law. Now, there's a ton of italicized words in verse 29, which means they're not in the original Hebrew. But the gist of the verse is this: your job is to keep the stuff that Deuteronomy says, and that's your job. The mysteries, don't worry about it, bro. It's not for you. You're not to know the mysteries. So Nephi at the very beginning says, actually, bro, it is. Like, I've been inducted to the mysteries. I also understand there's this argument, and Nephi doesn't call them the Deuteronomists, but the characters in the drama of First Nephi that are the Deuteronomists are Laman and Lemuel. So when they say the Lord maketh no such thing known unto us, another way they could have said it is, our job is to follow the rules of Deuteronomy. God doesn't give those mysteries. And Nephi's like, actually, he does. So it's everything you're saying, but it's rooted in this text, in this idea. And
this is literally egalitarianism versus elitism.
There's that also.
There's
absolutely.
that. And
it's
on top of it, too, there is just this warning to us that we could be of the same religion, but have such a fundamental misunderstanding that essentially creates almost a second religion. I think what you said was perfect, where these are minor changes, but they have massive implications. It's kind of like if I give you a completely working car, but I just take out the spark plugs.
Or you even
how does that
redefine what
work,
a car
right?
does, like what its purpose is. So,
What
for
its
example,
purpose is.
from the Deuteronomist perspective, the Holy of Holies was a place of darkness, and only one guy got to go in there. And Lehi and Nephi are standing here saying, not only are you supposed to go there, I'm begging you to come, and God has a family, and you can see him, and you can know him. And I'm going to say, in soft language, it's kind of with a light touch, there's also a divine mother, and they want you to come to them, and it's a place of light. But they're talking about the same room, but they're using different words. And so in our modern discourse, and I'm really bad at this, and I got to be careful, but in our modern discourse, I can say the word love, and that could mean like 3 or 4 different things to different people, depending on how they define the term. But we're all using the same English word, but we're dealing from a whole different mindset.
Including that weird statue in New York City.
What are you talking about?
Statue? What?
The love statue where the O is tilted sideways. And it's like,
Oh, isn't that Chicago?
oh, sorry. Okay.
Yeah.
I apologize. Yeah.
I was thinking,
Bad reference.
I'm like, are you talking the Statue of Liberty? Like, what's going on?
No, you're right. I'm going to look up where it is.
Okay.
Anyway, keep going.
So we are in the courtyard. Well, are we bringing it back to here? So we're in the
back to
courtyard,
geography.
and they're in the Valley of Lemuel.
But I also like. I actually want to. We're in like bonus time now here, right?
Yes.
Terry?
Yeah.
So look, your question's a good one. The answer is it changes everything, and this is what my book is about. So the whole point is, the Book of Mormon writers, I believe, with the sole exception of Zenith, okay, are visionary men. They are temple worshipers themselves, and they write for an audience they expect to be also temple worshipers, and their writing is full of temple imagery, and they expect you to see it. And their doctrines are shaped by and formed in the ordinance and the mythology, the story of the temple, the expulsion from return to Eden. And that's why we get over and over again this discussion of Adam and the fall. And it's why we get over and over again repeated images like the straight and narrow gate, the tree of life, like the foundation stone, obsessively in the Book of Mormon. Are they in the New Testament and the Old Testament? Absolutely. The Book of Mormon obsesses over these things. And so seeing these and understanding them for what they are unlocks whole other layers of meaning.
So are you saying you basically need to go to the temple in order to truly understand the Book of Mormon?
I think there are 2 great keys to the Book of Mormon. I think one thing that is very helpful is to have your own temple experience. The other thing I think is very helpful is to know as much as you can about their temple experiences. And so I think the other great key is actually, weirdly, and this feels like a 90-degree turn, is actually the Sermon on the Mount. Okay? And let me just give you I'll give you like a little walkthrough of a quick kind of indication of that right now. Okay? So the Sermon on the Mount is an ascent through 3-part space. It's Matthew 5, Matthew 6, Matthew 7. It ends in passing through a straight and narrow gate and then seeing the tree with good fruit. Just like Lehi passes along the straight and narrow path and sees the tree with fruit desirable to make one happy. Okay? And you can read the Sermon on the Mount as an ordinance, which starts with, by the way, what kind of ordinance is it? Matthew 5:1, Jesus sat upon the mount and his disciples approached him. It is the ordinance of approaching the person who sits on the mount. That means God sitting on his throne. Or since the Hebrew verb yeshav, to sit, also means dwell. It's the dweller on the mountain. You are approaching the dweller on the
And
mountain.
why is the mountain important? Because currently the temple is being used by people who are not being accepting of Christ. So why does he go to the mount?
Because you can do so. A temple is heaven is the mountain. You could do temple stuff on mountains. Absolutely. By the way, go to Judges 4 and you'll see Deborah, the bee woman, sitting under a tree named Deborah on a mountain, and people are approaching her. It appears to be the same scene.
One thing, what someone asked last night about the Samaritan temple as
Yeah.
well, right? Where were those Samaritan temples? They were on top of mountains.
Mount Gerizim.
And where's Mount Gerizim? It's in the general area where Jesus would have given the Sermon on the Mount.
Boy,
which is
it
kinda
would be
interesting.
really interesting. I at this point, what I tend to think is that what Jesus' ministry consisted of included initiating people into mysteries that had mostly been forgotten, but had been retained by a minority. And I think this is why their response is recorded as being astonishment. And I actually think these might have been mass events. I think when we're talking about the feeding of the 5,000 or the feeding the 4,000, maybe what we should imagine is Jesus, the son of the tectone. We know him. Why are we astonished? Because, oh my goodness, he's like leading us through the rites of kingship and showing us the return to Eden on a hillside in Galilee, right?
So just as you're saying the Sermon on the Mount was temple liturgy to mass initiate the participants in the Sermon on the Mount, with this symbolism that happens in 3 parts, with a narrow path that ends in a tree of life and a holy of holies, so on and so forth. You're saying that is an exact type and shadow, a reflection, a microcosm that represents another macrocosm of Lehi doing the exact same thing, but just with the tabernacle in the valley of Lemuel,
Yep.
with the tree of life vision to hopefully mass initiate his family into the mysteries that the Deuteronomists say were reserved only for the priests, but the Essenes and the true believing, proper believing, Orthodox, shall we say, Jews of the Book of Mormon would have preferred later, right? Is that what we're saying?
Yes. I
Okay.
could polish some of those details, but yes.
Wow.
Lehi and Nephi know the same ordinance that Christ knows and that Christ seems to teach in the Sermon on the Mount. And understanding that ordinance is a key to seeing what's in the Book of Mormon. Now, I want to follow one thread through the Book of Mormon to give you an example.
Okay.
Okay? So we're going to start in Matthew chapter 5.
Okay, cool. I'm there. Matthew chapter 5.
Okay, and
I do not
As
see
you're looking for it, there's one thing I do want to say. This makes it make so much sense why, when Christ comes to the people in Bountiful, he shows them the Sermon on the Mount.
Yeah, of course. It has to be in a temple.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Well, and it does make sense because here it says, "For blessed are they that mourn, for they shall be comforted," which kind of sounds a little bit temple ceremonial with "Blessed are the meek, for they shall inherit the earth." It's almost like a chant. And then it says, "Blessed are those that do, for they shall find the scriptural reference."
Correct. I have found it.
You know what I'm saying? You found
it. We
it.
could say
Okay,
a lot
cool.
about Bountiful. Or about
I could see like a pope, like almost
Even-
crossing you saying "do," and
Yeah.
then all of a sudden the scripture
Even
comes.
the idea of blessed is to
Yeah.
enter into the state of the gods. So the attributes of godliness are in the beginning of the sermon. So he's speaking about the Makarioi. We're changing to different beings.
Dude, I want to go to the temple now.
Okay, so verse 39, Matthew 5:39. Okay.
Okay. It's so sad that now we know all this depth to the temple ceremony and our church is neutering it for the feminists. You know what I'm saying?
I have no comment.
Garden. What? Oh, that's not what they're doing? Oh, sorry.
No,
There's actually some interesting theories I'll talk to you about.
Yeah,
Okay,
we
cool.
should talk about it.
Matthew
All right.
5:39. So one of the things about reading Matthew 5, 6, and 7 is there are apparently commandments and covenants here, but there are apparently also actions. Okay, you can read the text and say, what of these things can be acted out? Okay, now Matthew 5:39 says this: I say unto you, resist not evil, but whosoever shall smite thee on thy right cheek, turn to him the other also. Okay.
Okay.
Now, is there an action that we could envision being enacted ritually in that verse?
Resist not evil, but whosoever shall smite thee on the right cheek, turn him the other cheek also. Okay. Repeat that question.
So, is there a potential ritual action in here? Is there something that there's something in here that we could repeat as a ritual action?
Well, like
Smiting on the
ritualistically
cheek.
slapping each other?
That is correct. Smiting on the cheek, right? So you imagine,
Okay.
all right, so this is a moral instruction about not taking revenge. And it includes a sort of a smiting on the cheek. And by the way, our inclination, I think, having the sort of gentle kind of experiences of ordinances that we do, is that it would be like, a mock slap, right?
Okay, yeah.
Okay. So I actually think, and here's what I'm going to show you, that the Book of Mormon gives us reason to think that it wasn't that this was a ritual gesture and it was something closer to a beating. Okay? So
A ritual beating?
let's go in the temple. Correct. Helaman
I want to
4.
be a temple worker now.
Helaman
You know?
4.
I don't want you to be a
your
temple
anger out.
worker. No, you're too big.
Collarbone. Bah! Like, just...
Oh, here comes Bob.
This
I want to work with Bob.
Here's the thing I'm going to explain to you, okay? I'm going to explain to you why in 1 Nephi 2 it matters that Nephi is large of stature. That's where we're going with this. Helaman 4. Helaman 4, we have dissenters on the inside. They're causing trouble. They're putting us into the power of Lamanites on the outside, and we get a list of the bad stuff they do, okay? Verse 12. Helaman 4:12. And it was because of the pride of... This is an example, by the way, where I looked at this verse like for 30 years, read it, thought nothing of it, fine. And one day I went, oh my gosh.
But you didn't read it on Reddit.
I did not read it on Reddit. I do have a Reddit account. I never go there. And it was because of the pride of their hearts, because of their exceeding riches. These are the dissenters. Yeah, it was because of their oppression to the poor, withholding the food from the hungry, withholding the clothing from the naked. Okay, start paying attention. Smiting their humble brethren upon the cheek, making a mock of that which was sacred.
Oh.
Denying the spirit of prophecy and revelation, etc., etc.
So they could only say it was sacred,
Oh.
the smiting.
So first of all, John 18, when John is in front of the high priest Annas and they're smiting him, we should consider the possibility that maybe ordinances are being mocked there.
They're mocking Christ there as well as they smite him.
But what we seem to have here...
Wait, but hold on a second. If I'm understanding you correctly, you're saying that you believe, as evidenced by scriptures in the Sermon on the Mount and as evidenced by scriptures in Helaman 4:12
And
that
Alma
there-
14,
and Alma
yet.
14.
And we haven't even started with Psalm 22.
Okay, fine. And in Psalm 22 and I don't know, the Book of Jeremiah too, for all, if you
and the
want to throw
Aikido
that in there.
Festival in Babylon.
Okay, cool. Yeah, and a Dead Sea Scroll we haven't dug up yet. Okay, so in all of these different scriptural references, there was a ritualistic. You're suggesting a ritualistic smiting
Yes.
of the cheek,
Yes.
as part of temple liturgy. Well, if God is the same yesterday, today, and tomorrow, and the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints is the restoration of that church in the tomorrow of what was yesterday, then where is our smiting in the cheek?
Such a good question.
When Joseph endowed Brigham, he said, we have not got this quite right yet. So we've been tinkering with it since.
Wait,
So
are you guys saying you didn't get slapped when you went through the temple?
Yeah,
I
what-
got slapped before and after.
Carton, can I throw this out as a suggestion?
Okay. Yeah.
So just because the ritual, however it existed in certain ways, it morphs over time. And so the concept of an antidikos, like the person wearing the scary clothing, saying the scary things, throwing insults at me, the person who's going to come and hit me and stuff, that person is still in our temple liturgy, but it's been highly modified. But just like in the second room in their temple, they're doing this eating and dressing and clothing. The eating bit, I believe, has been transferred into our Heikal or our big room we get this in Catholicism and the Greek Orthodox Church and everything. We're eating there, and we're not eating physical food in the temple. And so we have to kind of relax our eyes a little bit and just say, okay, we don't have one-to-one equivalencies, but the general gist is there. And like David said, when Joseph turns to Brigham, he doesn't say, this is the OG 100% there. He says, man, I'm working with this. We're doing the best we can under the circumstances. And so I just want to kind of present that as a possibility that the Antidikos, the guy wearing all the scary stuff, saying the scary things, he's there, and he's there coming at you. And there's this idea of like,
Antidikos means it's like the Satan in the temple.
It means adversary?
The person coming at you. Yeah.
The accuser.
Yeah, the accuser. And by the way, this is Psalm 22. I mean, Psalm 22 is a big deal to the gospel writers, and they're quoting it throughout. The whole Psalm 22 is, I'm surrounded by these guys. They're beating me up. They're gnashing me out. They're coming to get me. I mean, do you want to read a couple bits of it?
Yeah,
I don't want to take away from David's stuff because it's so good.
We're in bonus time.
But kind of the stuff I've been doing deep dive on lately is I'm just like, this is my dissertation, right? So I'm doing stuff on Psalms, and I'm reading this, and I'm just like, once you see it, you can't unsee it.
Well, I just don't even know what we're going to title this video. Like the ceremonial ritual beatings we're missing out on in the temple.
Nephi gets punched in the face.
Like look at this. Like he in verse 6, he says, and it does say this in the text where he's like, I'm a worm. Like I'm just completely. I mean, now this is we could do on that, but anyway, look what it says in verse 7. They see me and they laugh me to scorn. And then verse 8, he trusted on the Lord, let him deliver him. So there's this ritual that took place in Babylon called the Aikido Festival, and what happened was the king, before he's anointed and enthroned, has to go through a ritual slapping where they slap him, and the idea was you got to slap him so much that he elicits tears and confesses his loyalty to God, and when he does, now he's ready to be enthroned. He's been humbled. So we have Nephi, and I don't want to steal this from Dave because we're going to get to the whole large in stature bit, but this idea of being beaten down before enthronement is exactly what's going on in the Gospels. This king is submitting to his father, and he's like, this is not something I'm stoked about doing, but Father, I'll do your will. And then he just gets destroyed. And then he's exalted. So and by the way, there's a lot of stuff Michael Heiser, because I know you're a Michael Heiser guy. I mean, you look in verse 12, the bulls of Bashan have beset me round about. I mean, the bulls of Bashan are the mythological demons of the darkness, if you read Michael Heiser's Unseen Realm stuff. So there's a lot going on with Psalm 22. And verse 16, the dogs have compassed me. They're piercing my hands and my feet. And we could talk about that with the Hebrews going on with there, because there's a lot of debate about that. But the idea is that you're surrounded, and it's brutal. And it's not just here. And it's not just in Matthew, and it's not just in Helaman 4, it's in other cultures. And it's also the hero's journey back to Joseph Campbell. I mean, is Luke Skywalker getting his freaking arm lopped off? Like he's literally, and then he descends into the pit, like he's literally looking up, and he's descending into darkness. This is old stuff, and it resonates. And that's why these stories, whether it's Star Wars or it's Psalm 22 or the Gospels, like they teach us something. Like when you go on your mission, people are throwing urine bombs at you, and you're like, this sucks. And the Lord's like, yeah, I know.
Wow. And even Isaiah, he uses some of this language in his stuff too. I'm trying to find where it's referencing.
Turning your back to the smiter.
Turning your back to the smiter. Set your face like a
49?
flint.
No. Or 50?
Yeah, and he talks about being smit
Wait, so
on the
this
face.
is all evidence of literally ritualistic beating in the ancient temples
Let's bring it back over here. So
that we're missing out on?
Sorry, I could not help it.
Bring it
Thank
back
you for
over here. The answer is yes. Bring it back over here. Alma 14. Okay. Now the Carden, you're gonna love Ammonihah.
Hot chicks, explosions, fast cars.
Here's the thing about Ammonihah.
It's Michael Bay on steroids.
Man.
Yeah, I was about to say.
In the worst possible way, yes to almost everything you said.
That is
all
correct.
right, Ammonihah's my place, baby.
So Ammonihah, I'll give you the high arc, and then let's look at some verses.
None of
in
this
14.
sucky tent in the desert with a grandpa that beats you stuff. I want like the Hummer that drives through the brick wall, Megan Fox getting out with like a chainsaw and a machete, and then like backflips and
Yeah.
stuntmen, and then walking away from the explosion without looking back.
Yeah, that is what you get. So in Alma and in Alma 14, Alma and Amulek confront Ammonihah. This is a city of people that they tell us once knew the mysteries. They once knew the liturgy, the ordinances of God, but they've forgotten them. Okay, this is Alma 12, and their hearts were hardened, so they forgot the mysteries. We know that also. So Alma makes that comment to us, and then Antiona in Alma 12 immediately corroborates that and says, about this whole resurrection thing you're telling us, but there was the cherubim and a flaming sword blocking the gate back into Eden, so no one can go back to Eden, so this whole resurrection thing is nonsense, which means they remember. This tells us that they remember in Antiona that the myth, the story of the mystery, was the expulsion from and the return to Eden. And what they have done to welcome these missionaries, okay, is they use the performances and the images of that ordinance to persecute and attack the believers. Okay, so first of all, they send forward Zeezrom to tempt them, and he basically offers to buy off their testimony for money. Behold, here are 6 onties of silver. Okay, and he is described by Alma as with using the word adversary, which outside of quotes from the New Testament Isaiah, only appears twice in the Book of Mormon writings. Once is 1 Nephi 15. It's explicitly Satan, the fiery darts of the adversary. And here, the adversary in Alma 5 is Satan as you encounter him on the ascent up to the tree of life. They build a fiery pit of hell, and they use the same language Jacob uses in 2 Nephi 9, and they throw believers into it, and they say, oh, look, your God can't save them, right? Because in the liturgy, in the ordinance, this is the wide gate and the broad way. It's the alternative to the straight and narrow gate, and God rescues you from the open mouth of hell. And so they build a mouth of hell and throw Alma and Amulek's converts into it and laugh while Alma and Amulek are tied up, okay? And there are other things too, but they beat them. Okay, so I'm in Alma 14.
Okay.
Oh.
So Alma 14, verse 14.
Sorry.
Yeah. Now it came to pass that when the bodies of those who had been cast into the fire were consumed, and also the records, the chief judge of the land, we don't get to know this clown's name, came and stood before Alma and Amulek as they were bound, and he smote them with his hand upon their cheeks.
Wow.
So what's going on here? And these apostates remember. I'm gonna put it in modern parts. So go ahead.
It's not just him though either, right? They line up, and all of these people come smiting him on the cheek.
That's what's going to happen. That's exactly right. So let's imagine a modern day parallel. Okay, let's imagine that we have someone has left the church, and he's not content to go have a psychology practice or whatever. He sets up, he sets up as the mayor of the town of Logan. He convinces everybody else to apostatize, okay? And then missionaries come by, and he's like, you know what we're going to do? I really hate these people. We're going to torture and murder them using the symbols of the endowment.
Yeah.
That's what's going on. Is the liturgy is being reversed and turned into a murder engine here.
A softer version of it is, hey, I'm going to do TikTok dances in my temple clothes, and I'm going to show all of the signs and tokens and make fun of them.
Yeah,
that's the softer version.
That's exactly right. So now what happens? I'm not going to read all these verses, but over the course of the rest of the chapter, the other elite of Ammonihah line up, and they come and they keep smiting him on the cheek.
And it came to pass that they departed and went their ways, but came again on the morrow, and the judge also smote them again on their cheeks. And many came forth also and smote them, saying, will you stand again and judge this people and condemn our law? If you have such great power, why do you not deliver yourselves?
And he smote them again and again, and he smote them, it turns out, 7 times. Verse 14 through 25, 7 times they are smote. And the last time, look at 25, after they're smoten the last time, they stand up. So that means they're beaten so hard they fall down. Now, by the way, I happen to have been reading this week, so post-writing the book, rereading the Message of the Joseph Smith Papyri. Why? Because Mike asked me to. So I'm rereading that, and Nibley talks about how Egyptian initiation ordinances include 7 ritual blows, which he calls the 7 blows of death or something, right? So, and what we have
He
here
does
is
not
What?
say that. You need the free. I need to see that, and we have to write this in the book.
it's too late. The book's coming out. We'll do this in a podcast.
This is called bonus material.
This is bonus material. This is the message.
Wait,
of
so
the
Hugh
Joseph-
Nibley said there were 7 ritual blows, and
In the
these
Egyptian
are ritual
ceremony.
in the ancient Egyptian ceremony
Yep.
of what?
Well, he's reading specifically the Book of Breathings, but I think he's talking about these blows exist in other ancient rituals too. But these are rituals by which one accesses the afterlife. They start in the grave and they end in Eden for the Egyptian.
So you're suggesting that the exact
Worshipper.
same 7 ritual blows that show up in the ancient Egyptian ceremonies, as evidenced in the Book of Breathings and many of the ancient Egyptian artifacts and papyri that would have become the Book of Abraham and so on and so forth, that those 7 ritualistic blows were also manifest scripturally in the Sermon on the Mount as a liturgical temple ceremony instead of just a sermon on a mount, and are also now missing from the temple ordinance in modernity, but were performed in the Valley of Lemuel with Lehi and Nephi, as evidenced by the Tree of Life ceremony.
So 100%. And I think that what this tells us, we're seeing the wickedness of Ammonihah. This is why in Alma 16, they are obliterated, man, woman, and child. They are a pile of corpses. Alma, to justify that, shows us how awful they have been. They're not just murderers, they're also blasphemers on an industrial scale. They turn temple worship into an instrument of murder and oppression, and therefore God wipes them off the earth, in one day. That's Alma 16. I don't know, verse 9 and 10, something like that. I'm not going to look at that one because we have one more step to go, okay? So one thing, Wayne, I think we can infer from this is the smiting on the cheek in Matthew 5 was not that. It was 7 blows, and you were struck 7 times, and I think you were probably struck so hard that at the end you fell down. Now, by the way, there's a whole bunch of other pieces in that ordinance that I think are physically grueling. You come fasting. You come maybe in a long-term fast.
A 40-day fast.
Maybe a 40-day fast. You strip down and carry chains on your body. You are in a room filled with incense. You are maybe work through physical exertions until you pass out and have a near-death death experience, so that you experience a resurrection. Okay, so this is physically
and this was performed in the tabernacle, or where was this performed?
wherever one could. But now here's the key thing.
Do we have any archaeological evidence of a temple somewhere where people were actually doing this? Or
well, we have principally literary evidence. There are various kind of little bits of archaeological evidence. But I want to point you at not 2nd Nephi, 1st Nephi 2.
Wow.
Okay, Nephi tells us twice that he is a big lad. Once it's in 1 Nephi 4 when he's dealing with Zoram. And the point of him telling us he's a big lad is that Zoram wants to run away. And Nephi says, "But I was large of stature, so I grabbed him and I held him." Okay? So in 1 Nephi 4, he tells us he's large of stature, but there's a point. It's not random. It's not just a curious fact about me. I am big boned. Okay? It's I am big, so I pinned the sucker and then I made him listen to reason. Okay.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Now let's look at 1 Nephi 2.
Okay.
17. Now let's remember that Nephi has heard his father's first temple visions of the throne of God and the Holy of Holies. I lie, 16, not 17.
Yeah, I was going to say 16 is the money shot right there.
16 is the money shot. 17 is Sam. We're not going to talk about Sam. He's not that interesting. Okay. Nephi's
Sorry,
heard-
Sam.
And the Jews of Jerusalem want to kill him. Okay. Now, and remember that in 1 Nephi 1:1, Nephi says, "I, having known the goodness and the mysteries of God, therefore I write this book," right? So him writing this book has something to do with him being an initiated man, having undergone the mystery. So now, Carden, listen to this, verse 16. "And it came to pass that I, Nephi, being exceedingly young," okay, I was way younger than ordinarily,
Yeah.
"but nevertheless, being large in stature, and also having great desires to know of the mysteries of God, wherefore I did cry unto the Lord. Behold, he did visit me." So now look, this begins to tell us what the mysteries of God are. It's the Lord visits, right? You meet the Lord, and that's true. That's in Matthew 6 and 7 in the Sermon on the Mount. But why does he tell us? He says, "I was really young." Why does he tell us? Why does it matter that he was big?
So you don't beat a little kid.
Because you don't. He's because this is a physically grueling experience where they, among other things, punch you in the face 7 times, and he's saying, "Look, I really wanted to know, and I was really young for it, but I was big, so I could take the physical punishment that was involved in being initiated in the mysteries of God." And therefore,
like the young men that lied about their age in order to go serve in World War II.
And you maybe didn't get away with it if you were a tiny, scrawny kid. But if you were a bigger kid, probably it wasn't a problem.
Like I lied about at my age, saying that I was 18 to sign up for the draft when I was really 16. But hey, I was 6'4" already, so they believed me.
Because I was large of stature. Okay. My father and Ishmael, or Ishmael's not down there yet, right? My father and whoever it is went ahead and introduced me into the mysteries of God.
Wow.
So knowing this stuff, right, this is the thing. The question was, does it change our perspective on the Book of Mormon? And the answer is systematically throughout, right? Systematically throughout.
I can't read the Book of Mormon the same anymore. You ruined the Book of Mormon reading it on a different level.
That is my goal, is to ruin the Book of Mormon.
No, but it's so much more rich.
The good kind of ruin. The good kind of ruin. Yeah.
Well, honestly, just because you said that, there's deep gospel implications in that. The seed has to break in order to grow, right? Mm-hmm. Like that's great.
100%.
Continue, yeah.
And I was just, as you were talking, I couldn't help but see the imagery of the escape from Egypt's tyranny. So like when you think about the context of when the tabernacle was given, right? And the first temple ordinances to the children of Israel, it's right after they get out. And so as you're talking about these symbols that were used, you have the 40-day fast potentially, you have the bonds, the chains around them, you have the ritual blows. Like to me, I see this the macrocosm of the children of Israel escaping and then entering the promised land is it's the temple. You know what I mean? And you see these elements as well in the ritualistic moving through the temple.
And now you have this reverse exodus happening where they're leaving the promised land,
right,
and they're going out and towards a new promised land that God has given them, because the people that they're leaving have become, ironically, not just like Egypt, but aligned with Egypt. Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
they're looking at them as allies, and that's why the Babylonians come in to destroy them.
They're leaving the city of peace. They're leaving Eden into the wilderness and then going to Eden.
Okay, so then just here's my question. Is what's this video about now? Because it started out saying, well, Laman and Lemuel, they were just a bunch of filthy Deuteronomists.
Well, so hold on.
Okay.
So let me
then it morphed into you need to go to the temple to completely understand the Book of Mormon.
Yeah.
And then it morphed into Laman and Lemuel are a bunch of filthy Deuteronomists who neutered aspects of the temple ceremony. You need to go to the temple in order to truly understand the Book of Mormon. Why? Because we're missing out on some ritualistic blows that were so bad, Nephi had to be large in stature to be able to survive them. So which one is this video?
Go to my camera. Go to my camera quick.
We can tie this back
in the language of Adam. We're learning the language of Adam. All of this is just that. We are learning that there is a certain language for those who are initiated, those who take on the robes of righteousness.
So he's endorsing corporeal punishment and spanking back into our culture. No, I'm just kidding.
So actually, this might tie things back in together.
Okay, hit it.
As we were just talking about leaving Jerusalem, leaving the city of peace as an Edenic sort of thing, and going out into the wilderness, we now have the tabernacle set up with the altar and the water.
And
right?
the water.
And we haven't even touched Shazer yet.
Yeah, let's move forward through Shazer to Bountiful.
Let's run through the end of that. Yeah, and I think that's the 22-minute video. And if you got a separate bonus video, I want it to be called Nephi Gets Punched in the Face. Because I think that's to me, that's the money shot. So look, so what else happens in the open courtyard in the Valley of Lemuel? It turns out that basically all of Matthew 5 happens in there. And so you see that during the period the family's there, Nephi runs through all of the beatitude blessings in the order in which they are fulfilled in the ordinance.
Really?
Yes, but like, is this a 4-hour video, or do you want to read the book?
Okay, I'll read the book.
We can do it.
Yeah, that's awesome.
But he does, starting from seeing the Lord in 1 Nephi 2:16 to all the way to entering into the kingdom. So there are 3 commandments or covenants introduced in Matthew chapter 5. There's a new law of marriage, and Nephi and his brothers get married. There's laws of turning the other cheek and loving your enemy, and Nephi shows us him turning the other cheek and loving his enemy in his behavior with his brothers. The Matthew 5 teaches a way to. We're getting super compressed versions of like 3-hour conversations here. It teaches how do you accept covenants. After the law of marriage is introduced, there's this discussion of oaths, and it says you don't swear complex oaths. When you're given a commandment of God, you just say yea or nay. Okay? Again, ritual action. This is how you are taught to accept a new commandment of God. Well, 1 Nephi 3:7, when Lehi comes and says, God has he doesn't say I want you. He says God has commanded. God has commanded that you and your brothers go back to Jerusalem. And we know that Nephi is capable of swearing oaths because in other contexts, in non-commandment accepting contexts, he swears oaths. He and Zoram swear oaths to each other. Okay, He does that. But in this context where he's accepting a commandment, he doesn't. He doesn't say, as the Lord lives, I shall go back to Jerusalem. He says, I will go and I will do. Yes. Because I know the Lord giveth no commandment save he maketh a way, right? So we see the yes or no to accept covenants. We also see at the end of Matthew 5:48, there's a transition and a new status, and people are given a new title, which is a new status, which is the peaceable ones, the complete ones, the perfect ones, the shalom. Okay, the time of the family in the Valley of Lemuel, in the open courtyard space, in the Matthew 5:48 conceptual space, ends with the statement that Lehi has completed everything that God asked him, right? He is complete. He is perfect. He is shalom. He is yishalem at all the things that God has told him to do. Matthew 5 is entirely contained in the first 16, chapter 2 through 16 of 1 Nephi. Now, then the journey starts. We get Shazer. This was like the sort of silver bullet that Hayden pointed me at. Okay. So what happens in Shazer? Nothing. Hey, we went to Shazer. We ate some food. We left Shazer. That's basically what we get over 2 verses. Okay. Now, again, he's writing on gold plates. Stuff has to matter or he's not going to put it down. There's no Nephi is bored and hey, for fun, la-di-da. Okay.
Yeah.
So what does Shazer mean? What can it mean? Well, it turns out that it is a Hebrew word. Okay,
one who shazes.
One who shazes. That is actually
he who shazes.
That is actually correct.
Shaze your face. Shaze your legs.
To shaze actually means to twist.
So 1 Nephi 16 verse 13a, footnote A, gives you the Hebrew twisting, intertwining.
Oh, how funny. I didn't even notice that. So good job, scripture footnote people.
Whoop, whoop.
So shazer is to twist or entwine. Now that word, shazar, the verb is to twist or entwine. Now, in that form, it does not appear in the Old Testament. That word appears 21 times in the Old Testament, all in the book of Exodus, all in the form mashzar. Now, what is the form mashzar? Well, that's an adjective form. Okay, think about the M in front as turning it into an adjective. That's not exactly right, but that will do. Okay.
So it's the same word, but it's just in a different part of speech.
It's the same word. It's the same root. Okay. It's like saying grow and groan.
It's not a proper noun in this sense. It's adjective.
Yeah. So mashzar. So what is it? Why is it 21 times in the book of Exodus? Well, what it means is fine twined, and it is used to describe all of the cloth things that are made to comprise the tabernacle or the clothing the priests wear. So it's the breeches and it's the ephod. It's also the temple veil. It's also the walls of the tabernacle. It's also the walls around the courtyard. And specifically, it is the door by which one enters the tabernacle. It's made of shesh mashzar.
Oh.
So,
wow.
Why is Shazer showing up here? I think the only reason it can possibly be here is for Nephi to say the word. It's only here to point out that nothing happens. It's here for us to see the name. And I think it's here for us to go, this reminds me of the fine twined linen, the shesh mashzar, which is entry by which I pass into the main room of the tabernacle.
It's almost like a duress code that like CIA people talk about. Like,
that's exactly
honey,
right.
I won't be home to eat the steak and eggs.
Right.
So, and
I've
steak
been
and
kidnapped.
eggs is like
Means something.
a phrase for, exactly. I've been kidnapped and I'm in the basement or something.
So it's interesting because what Dave has pointed out is that there are places that have names but no description because nothing really happens, and there are places that have descriptions of things that happen but he doesn't give a name to it. So with Shazer specifically, all we know is that you pass through. So everything before Shazer is in the courtyard of the temple. They pass through Shazer, meaning Mashazar, like the doorway of the temple, the tabernacle, and then you enter into the second room of the tabernacle.
In the second room of the tabernacle, exactly right. And by the way, Lehi does this too. In 1 Nephi 8, he calls out a series of words as you are passing along the three-part ascension space. He calls out the name of the rooms, Olam for Ulam, Heikal, and he says, I dibarti in the debir, and also references the name of the tree of life. He says it was a tree whose fruit was desirable to make one asher, right? So Lehi has done this in his ascent. He's calling out names to tell us where we are. Now Nephi does it, and the name here, he's calling out the name of the door, okay? The material of which the door is made. So that's the courtyard. The third space is Eden. The middle space is the tabernacle. Now, just to make a short discussion of it, we have only one name in there, which is Nahum, which connects to a couple of different verbs. We don't know exactly how Nahum is spelled in Hebrew because there's two H's in Hebrew. Okay, we don't know which H is here. So, and in fact, the H's are very similar phonetically and in writing. So, like, you could kind of hint, Hebrew loves wordplay. You could use the one H to kind of hint at the other. Okay, those two, the roots Nechem and Nehem carry meanings like mourn, complain, grieve, repent, comforted. Now, what happens along in this second room, which is basically 1 Nephi 16, after the Liahona to the end, so like, I don't know, verse 12 to 35 or something, is a whole bunch of actions that are expressed in terms of those verb roots. Okay, there's two episodes. One is breaking of the bow, and everybody grieves and they complain, and then my father feels bad after I go and hunt, and so so he then repents. Okay, so we get murmuring, and we get repentance. And then when Ishmael dies and they go to beat up Nephi, and then because they feel grief and they complain, but then he exhorts them and they repent and they're comforted, right? So the verb roots seem to play along both of these episodes, connecting them with ideas of grief, murmuring, complaint, repentance, and comfort. Okay, both episodes then end in eating. Okay, and specifically, they are feasts where it is God who gives you the food. Okay, both at the end of the bow episode and at the end, even after the burial of Ishmael, God gave us food and we ate. All of this. So the idea, so the second room of the temple, the ascent in Matthew 6. Lots of stuff happens, but it's dominated by meeting the Lord and having a feast with the Lord in His presence, with food He gives you, which is His own flesh and blood, which results in you receiving comfort.
By the way, just as a timeout, Luke is playing with the same imagery where you have Jesus having an exchange dialectically with his questioners in the courtyard. Then we proceed to a high room where he feeds them, and he says, take, eat, this is me, and he's feeding them. And then it ends with his ascent to the Mount of Olives, where he then communicates with his Father. So Luke's doing this stuff. It's happening here. It's really interesting, this second room and this feeding. I love to go to the Greek Orthodox Church, and you're eating, they're eating the sacrament, and you're looking at the images of all the dead. Obviously, there's Mary. A lot of times they'll have the saint, whoever's church it is, he'll be on there.
Yeah.
And you'll have Jesus and these images. And the idea when you talk to these people, and those that are in the know, they say the idea is when you eat the Eucharist, and eu is like good in Greek, and charis is the word for grace. So eu, charis, Eucharist, is you're eating the good grace of the bread of the presence in the presence of those living
And those dead.
and those that are dead. And if you read section 27 of Doctrine and Covenants, the Lord says there is going to be a day when you and I eat the bread and drink the wine in the presence of, and then he lists all these names of the all-stars of the dead. So the idea of this second room and eating, we do it in our church today. But I think what I'm hearing Dave say is anciently they did it in the temple.
Yeah, manifestly. And it's what we see in Exodus 24 also. The elders of Israel ascend to the second space, feast with God, and then they ascend up. Joshua, and Moses ascend to the third.
Okay, Brad.
And not to go on too far of a tangent here, but I've never thought about the 2 episodes that you're talking about here of Nephi going after food and then the death of Ishmael through the wilderness. But it makes me think of the atonement and the way that it's overcoming sin, right? With Nephi having to rebuild his own bow and follow through asking Lehi where to go and finally getting the salvation of being able to survive, right? And then overcoming sin and overcoming death and passing forward. It's what the atonement does for us.
I think that, so there's more to say here. This is probably a different conversation. Maybe when we won't have, but
Yeah.
But I think that there is that as people approach this table in a feast with the Lord, they have a simulated death and resurrection experience. Now, again, in our sedate modern ordinances, we might expect that something like close your eyes, pretend you're dead, now wake up, right? But if you look at the experiences that Lamoni and Lamoni's wife and Lamoni's father and Alma all report, it's something much bigger, with crying out to God for mercy, passing out, and waking up to seeing visions of the throne. So I think this feast is part of the resurrection. I think another way to sort of experience it is I have just died, I awaken, I am dressed in my resurrected body, which is what the robes of righteousness are, and I eat my own funeral feast, which is a feast with God as I'm about to enter into the kingdom of Eden. He has brought down the tree of the fruit of life, which is his own flesh, because he is the fruit of the tree, and I'm going to eat this, and then I'm going to pass through the straight and narrow gate and be admitted into the kingdom of Eden.
Okay, so that's...
I need to get your book.
Yeah, I'll tell you one thing too. One thing I want to say. So get the book, and one thing that's awesome that we did with this that I think is pretty unique, there's a QR code at the end of every single chapter. And so what that means is there is 12 hours worth of bonus conversations that we recorded that are exclusive to you buying this book. And so
That's like a full road trip.
All of
with
this
Dave
stuff,
Butler.
yeah. All of this
That's one
stuff
way
that,
to LA.
all of this stuff that we're like, there's a longer explanation of this. You'll get it in the book as well as in the bonus conversations that we have in the book. Right, link in the description.
Well, that's it. If it feels like this is really deep, like we're skimming over the top here, actually.
Yeah, we're skimming.
Okay,
a lot.
so you've done the first 2 steps. Is there a third?
Well, the third is Eden, right? We started in
bountiful.
Eden. So it's bountiful. We come to bountiful for its much fruit and its honey. What's there? We have many waters, as we have the water of life flowing at the foot of the tree of life. Nephi meets God repeatedly. He builds a boat, which is to say an ark. And this was the point Hayden was making. He puts inside it honey and seeds, and he puts into it the law that he saved, that he recovered from his cousin Laban. Right. We even get we get a long sermon Nephi preaches to his brothers, where some images that show up are things we expect to have in the temple. Like this is one of the 4 places where the Nephite record refers to the Nehushtan. So Isaiah 6 says that the seraphim come down from above the throne. So that means where the Nehushtan belongs is in the Holy of Holies. Okay, and here in Eden, the Holy of Holies, Nephi makes a reference to Nehushtan. He talks also about Moses striking a rock and water coming out, which is a reference in an Exodus setting to the Holy of Holies with its foundation stone and its flowing water. Right. So all of the to a fairly long list, the elements of the Holy of Holies are all there present in the land of Bountiful.
One of the things I like to add is the story, and this is channeling Ezekiel. Ezekiel has this vision of the temple, and from the Holy of Holies is issued this water that comes up and waters and heals the earth. And in this story of First Nephi, they read this story about how Moses smote the rock. This is verse 29 of First Nephi 17. He says that Moses, by the power of God which was in him, smote the rock, and there came forth water that the children of Israel might quench their thirst. So if you're quenching your thirst, you're drinking the waters
of eternal
Eden.
life. And also Christ, right? If you drink the water that he has to give, there will be a well of everlasting life, right? It's like that. It's that waters of everlasting life.
Christ is the fruit of the tree. He is very closely associated with the tree of light and life. He's the fruit. He is the light upon it. Sometimes, yes, he's connected with the waters also, because we're told 1 Nephi 11:25, the waters and the tree are the same thing.
There's this also command in verse 7 of 1 Nephi 7 where it specifically states that the Lord came to him and said, arise and get to the mountain. And so there's this idea that you're commanded to rise up and come and meet him. That's a very common temple-like motif. In the Greek, they use this phrase anastasis. This is like this idea of get back up. And this is back to Lehi. Arise from the dust, put on the robes of righteousness, and be men.
So hold on. So how is the anastasis translated in the New Testament when it shows up?
Resurrection.
Resurrection.
It's
So
the
resurrection in Greek means standing up.
Yeah. So there's a lot going on here.
Here he is standing up. So again, another kind of like, well, what meaning does this add? Is okay. Nephi tells us up front he gets initiated, but then he shows us, he uses the initiatory journey to show his maturation as a leader and as a prophet and as a man.
And a king.
And as a king. And when he gets to the end, what happens? Dad dies, boom, he has to take over, right? So that's as a story on the sort of Joseph Campbell level, right? That's what Nephi is showing us here.
Okay, awesome. So, is this one done?
Yes, I think
Okay.
I think this one's in the can.
All right.
We all need to reread the Book of Mormon. That's what I get from this.
For real,
we need to study this our whole freaking lives
and read it through a temple lens. You know, I think that is such an interesting thing, especially looking back. Nephi telling us he's known the goodness and mysteries of God. He wants us to learn more about them as we read it. So, I love this.
All right.
This is awesome.
So, the name of the book, guys, is In the Language of Adam. If you like what you have heard thus far, I'm going to put a link to this book once it comes out. This has got this weird little not for resale bar on it, so just ignore that. Okay.
It's a proof.
But D. John Butler, which I know looks cutesy dootsy, almost like Dr. John Butler. You know what I'm saying?
Oh,
but
there we go.
I don't know if you did that, just
No, it's my general authority name.
Oh, I see what you're saying. Yeah, that was the second thing I thought.
Not David J. Butler.
But anyway, if you guys like, yeah, Brad?
The crazy thing about this book is they wrote it in the actual language of Adam, which weirdly enough is Hungarian.
Yeah.
Okay.
So if you're going to have to learn Hungarian to read any of the book. But
Correct.
So if you like what you have heard, if you're smelling what they're stepping in, check out the book In the Language of Adam. And as always, for this and more, please check us out at wardradio.com.